Welcome to Travel On. Today we're looking at 20 more of the most beautiful cities in the world. That's right, I got a lot of flack for leaving some cities off the first list, so I decided to make a part 2. As they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so I will do my best to explain why it is I find each of these cities so beautiful. Ready? Let's get to it. London, England. London is like living in a time capsule, where every new age is added to the ones before. Big Ben has counted every second for centuries, while the Thames runs quietly through the city, washing away its secrets. London's beauty is best captured in 1,000 tiny fragments. Boats along the pier, the majesty of the Royal Guard parades, or even the sunsets from a stone bridge. It's the collection of all these tiny moments that captures my mind. Sure, the city is nice from afar, but how many people really see a city from high above? It's those grounded moments where you're entering into a 150-year-old subway system or visiting one of the many free museums. It's the lights at night while out for a walk, or the reminders of history that you wake up to. The city has a grand presence, with places for a quiet soul. It's the uniqueness of the architecture, the infrastructure, and the history that makes London's beauty really stand out and worth a closer look. Florence, Italy. You know, it's really crazy that I didn't put Florence in the part 1 of this video, but you gotta make cuts somewhere, right? There are marble cathedrals, galleries, squares, and narrow streets where everything seems to scream Renaissance. In the Piazza della Signoria, you'll find the marble works of Michelangelo and Donatello, or a copy of one of them. And nearby, the Uffizi Gallery holds treasures that changed the course of art. Brunelleschi's dome towering over Santa Maria del Fiore seems like an impossible task even after centuries. But if you're looking more for inner beauty, keep in mind that in the 16th century what we now call classical European music was born in Florence. Here, it's not just beauty, but the love of beauty that drives this city. Enjoy the food and the views. Take your time. Just walk, look, breathe. Florence is the place where art becomes life, and life becomes art. Dresden, Germany. Dresden is like looking into a box. The more you open the lid, the more it reveals its treasures. Nicknamed the Florence of the Elbe, Baroque spires, golden domes, and graceful pavements are reflected in the calm waters of the river, creating the image of a city that knows how to heal with beauty. Once almost wiped off the face of the earth in 1945, Dresden was rebuilt brick by brick. Its pre-war beauty has been restored in galleries, cathedrals, and palaces. The most famous of these is the Zwinger, a Baroque pearl where Rembrandt and Raphael live side by side. Dresden is home to the world's oldest Christmas market, the Striezel Market, founded in 1434, and also the largest open-air porcelain frieze in Germany. The procession of princes is more than 100 meters long. Dresden is a city that knows the value of destruction and rebirth. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Dresden seems poised to amaze visitors for centuries to come. Kinda like this channel, but only if you click like and subscribe to help the algorithm push it out to a wider audience. Tokyo, Japan. Tokyo is one of those cities that amazes you the second you step foot in it. If you're used to smaller cities, it can feel a bit overwhelming with millions of points of light bombarding you from every angle. In the Shibuya quarter, the streets hum with neon and the footsteps of thousands of people. Yet, moments away you'll find yourself in the silence of a Shinto shrine, as though the city lights were just a memory. The Tokyo Skytree towers above the city, literally the second tallest in the world. Tokyo is said to have the most punctual subway in the world. The average delay is less than 18 seconds, and there are more Michelin-starred restaurants here than in any other city in the world. The classic beauty of the cherry blossoms, or the modern beauty of a city that runs constantly, Tokyo proves that there is beauty in all things. Don't just see the city, see the wonder of the city. Strasbourg, France. Strasbourg is one of the cities that sneaks up on you. It doesn't wow you all at once, but as you explore, you find yourself lost in its timeless beauty. This is one of those storybook towns. Half-timbered houses with flowers on their balconies are reflected in the canals. Narrow streets lead to cozy wine cellars. And above all this rises the majestic Notre Dame Cathedral, one of the tallest in Europe. Walking around the Petite France district, it is easy to get lost in time. The cobblestones rustle under your feet, the smell of fresh pastries and Alsatian wine, and the houses built centuries ago still living their daily lives. In the evening, Strasbourg lights up, and the reflections in the water give you perfect postcard photos. Or a few for the gram. And here, every year since 1570, one of the oldest Christmas markets in the world takes place. Strasbourg has a timeless beauty, a classic look that never seems to go out of style. Maybe one day that sentiment will change, and we will all be poorer for it. But for now, we rest easy knowing Strasbourg is waiting. Tbilisi, Georgia. Tbilisi is unexpected. This east meets west city has ancient fortresses looking upon modern buildings, and the smell of traditional khachapuri filling the air. The heart of the city is Old Tbilisi, with its narrow streets, balconies with carved railings, and colorful facades. The Narikala Fortress towers over the city, offering unique views of red roofs, the meandering Kura River, and temples and mosques that have peacefully coexisted for centuries. Tbilisi is home to one of the oldest outdoor cable cars in the world, and one of the most picturesque. There is also a sulfur bathhouse here, which Pushkin called the best of all that he had visited. I like Tbilisi. It's not flashy and overbearing, but filled with simpler pleasures like food and music, and a soft glow at night that makes nightly walks a relaxing adventure. Verona, Italy. Where there is beauty, there is love, and Verona has its share of love. Here, the ancient columns and narrow streets have become a pilgrimage for romantics from across the world. Though Shakespeare made Verona famous for tragedy, the city's obsession with love predates Romeo and Juliet by centuries. The Arena di Verona, which is older than the Colosseum itself, still hosts opera singers under the starry sky. And the Piazza delle Erbe, the former Roman Forum, is pretty active with markets, cafes, and laughter with good friends. There is more than 2,000 years of history preserved in Verona, so much so that the entire city is included on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This is a city for dreamers and lovers and wanderers with an open heart. Strolling the streets of Verona, you may not find your Romeo or Juliet, but you will fall in love nonetheless. Shanghai, China. Obviously, when we talk about Shanghai's beauty, we're talking about the massive skyline. Few cities are able to match this. On the banks of the Huangpu River, they're building for the future. The glittering Pudong district with the moon tower, like a space needle, pierces the sky. And on the opposite shore, in the Bund, there are elegant European-style buildings, a reminder of the colonial past. There aren't many places I would say try the street dumplings, but definitely do. The lanterns in the ancient Yuyuan district can get you lost in the medley of modern shopping malls and tea houses. Shanghai is home to the fastest commercial railway in the world, the maglev, which reaches speeds of up to 431 kilometers an hour. That's 268 miles per hour. It was also here that China's first skyscraper was born. As beautiful as the city is during the day, the night is when it really shines. Get out and explore, and you just might become a night owl. Munich, Germany. Munich is the heart of Bavaria, where tradition and the modern world collide, where opera and Oktoberfest have equal standing. A city where geraniums bloom in the squares and the air smells of baked goods and fresh hops. The Neues Rathaus clock and the nearby English Garden each offer different sides to beauty. You might even meet surfers riding an artificial wave on the Eisbach River. I fell in love with the smell of German sausages in the open markets, but if your passion is science, the Deutsches Museum allows a hands-on experience. Munich's beauty is in the experiences you have while here. Whether you're in the pub or out in the street, you can find beauty in every moment. Salzburg, Austria. Salzburg is mostly known as the city of Mozart. Coming here, you can be inspired by the city that inspired some of the greatest pieces of music ever created. The Hohensalzburg Fortress, one of the largest in Europe, stands high above the city while the Salzach River flows below, reflecting the facades in the Rococo and Baroque styles. Salzburg is not only the birthplace of the great composer, but also the place where The Sound of Music was filmed. And every year, thousands of art lovers come here for the famous Salzburg Festival. In Salzburg, they still produce the original Mozart Kugel, a ball of marzipan and praline covered in chocolate. True gourmets look for the handmade, not factory-made. I've had probably a few too many of these, and I'd do it again. The mountain backdrop, the castle on the hill, this city's timeless beauty is not something you're going to find anywhere else. You know what else you won't find anywhere else? This channel, Travel On. Help me keep it going by clicking like and even subscribing. It really does make a huge difference to a small channel like this. Yerevan, Armenia. Yerevan is a city that most people would not expect to be on this list, but it's older than Rome and carries the beauty of the historical ages with it. The color of Yerevan is pink, not figuratively, but literally. The buildings in the center are made of tuff, a volcanic stone that shimmers from powdery pink to fiery coral. This is especially beautiful in Republic Square, where dancing fountains accompanied by classical music become an evening experience. The spirit of Ararat, a majestic mountain that can be seen from almost everywhere, seems to hover over the city. According to legend, this is where Noah's Ark landed. Although the mountain is located in Turkey, it is a sacred symbol for Armenians. The city is ancient, but has grown with the times. The beauty of the natural color brings Yerevan into the right light, even at night. Jerusalem, Israel. Jerusalem is a city where time seems to form a multi-layered mosaic, reflecting millennia of faith, hopes, and passions. The narrow streets of the old city keep the breath of ancient civilizations, and each stone building is a witness to historical events that changed the world forever. Here, at the Western Wall, thousands of pilgrims touch their hands, whispering prayers, imbued with a special atmosphere of spiritual unity. A walk along the Temple Mount is like a journey to the Holy of Holies of three world religions, where the Dome of the Rock shines golden in the sun. In the evenings, the old city is filled with the mysterious light of lanterns and the smell of incense, and the melodies of Arabic chants intertwine with Hebrew songs and Christian hymns. Jerusalem has more than 35 different religious communities, making it one of the most multinational cities in the world. And here you'll find the Mount of Olives, a place with a breathtaking view of the entire city, especially beautiful at dawn when the first rays of the sun play on the golden domes. Beijing, China. Beijing is a legendary city with ancient cultural ties. The rhythms of the modern world don't compete with the living open-air museum feel of the city, but accents the imperial dynasties and revolutionary transformations the city has seen. A walk through the Forbidden City, the kingdom of emperors with its majestic halls, carved roofs, and mysterious gardens, allows you to touch history, where centuries retain their whisper. But the city also pops with big, shiny objects built for the modern world. But don't let them distract you from the fact that not too far away is the Great Wall of China, one of the wonders of the world. This wall is so huge that you can see it from space. Beijing is also the birthplace of Peking opera, where theatrical productions add a colorful flair to the beauty of Beijing. Vienna, Austria. Vienna is a city of music, art, and impeccable taste. This city has an aristocratic elegance that is beautiful and romantic. If you're not satisfied with the beauty of Vienna's culture, then perhaps her natural beauty will appeal to you. More than 50% of Vienna is occupied by parks, where residents can take a break from the hustle and bustle of daily life. A special Viennese coffee house is a whole ritual, where people go to enjoy the slower pace of an afternoon. Vienna is also home to one of the oldest and most beautiful zoos in the world, where rare and exotic animals live. Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva's abundant greenery and crystal clear lake access sold me. This city seems determined to maintain an aesthetic that creates a peaceful coexistence with the land around it. Though I wasn't there for international diplomacy, the atmosphere of global responsibility was everywhere. Taking a walk in the Old Town, I was able to drop into some cafes for chocolate-covered pastries in between stops at museums. The famous Jeu d'eau fountain, throwing a stream of water 140 meters high, or 640 feet, is a symbol of strength and purity. Do you find beauty in small things? Well, Geneva watches are world-renowned marvels. Enjoying a view of the Swiss Alps while out for a morning stroll is not something many of us get to do every day. Frankfurt am Main, Germany. I stopped in Frankfurt for a couple of days with family on our way to a wedding, and though it was cold, you could tell there was something special about this city. We walked over the bridge to the Old Town to enjoy classic meals and the famous apple wine, which I didn't know you could order a sweet version with lemonade added in. A walk through the Old Town is an encounter with Renaissance facades, cozy cafes, and shops, and in the evening, the city is illuminated by lights reflected in the city's calm waters. Sevastopol, Crimea. Sevastopol should be on a list of places you cannot go. Because of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, most people cannot get visas to this beautiful land. The older buildings are largely made of white stone and project an image seen more in the Greek islands, which is not surprising because the Greeks settled here 2,500 years ago. Tauric Chersonesus is an ancient Greek city founded in the 5th century BC and became an important center of trade, culture, and Christianity on the Black Sea coast. In the 4th century, Prince Vladimir converted to Christianity here. And archaeologists have found the remains of an ancient Christian basilica, one of the first churches in the region. In the 19th century, archaeological excavations revealed unique ancient monuments, thanks to which Chersonesus was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today, it is a living, open-air museum where you can see the ruins of ancient temples, residential buildings, and fortifications, feeling the spirit of the Greek and Byzantine eras. Aside from its history, Sevastopol is also famous for its cozy beaches, seafood, and a warm atmosphere. There is so much more to Sevastopol than being a naval seaport. I could easily fill 30 minutes with the history and culture of this beautiful land, but I won't. We'll leave it here for now and hope one day I can go back and see some old friends. Lucerne, Switzerland. Next on our list is Lucerne, a beautiful lakeside town with mountain peaks that looks like it came straight out of an illustrated fairy tale. The famous Chapel Bridge, a wooden bridge with colorful frescoes, has been guarding the city for hundreds of years. In the evenings, the light of the lanterns reflects in the calm waters of Lake Lucerne, perfect for romantic walks. Pilatus, a mountain with legends about dragons, is located nearby. Come for the lively Fastnacht Carnival, or come for the quiet interludes between busy work schedules. This city invites you to stop and enjoy the moment. Immerse yourself in the atmosphere of days past and the scenery that wraps around it. Seoul, South Korea. Seoul is a city where traditional Korean culture meets cutting-edge technology. Skyscrapers illuminate ancient palaces, while museums sit alongside temples and traditional markets where you can sample kimchi, barbecue, and local crafts. The city is full of youthful energy, trendy cafes, and high-tech gadgets. Yes, there is a historical past, but Seoul is more of a modern beauty, like New York or Seattle. You won't have to sacrifice any of your old comforts, and maybe you'll leave with a few new ones. Chiang Mai, Thailand. Chiang Mai is the pearl of northern Thailand, where sunrises fill the air with jasmine and ancient temples rise from the fog. This city is surrounded by green mountains and forests, and in its center there is peace and tranquility, created by monasteries and traditional crafts. Every autumn, the Loy Krathong Festival takes place, an amazing spectacle when thousands of candles float on the water, illuminating the night with a soft, warm glow. Chiang Mai is also home to sacred elephants, symbols of wisdom and strength, with which the locals maintain a special connection. Chiang Mai's temples reflect the cultural traditions and natural beauty of the real, yet picturesque, Asia. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. You have no idea how much it means to a small channel like mine. If you have a city you think should have been on this list, leave it in the comments and let us know why you find it so beautiful. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, stay safe and travel on.